Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me again on this amazing platform. And as always, especially thank you, Linda, for saying yes to my, suggestion for this presentation. So today I would like to talk to you about what's the closest thing to my heart, which is how to use astrology for personal shadow work. This has been my last 20 or so years of my life. It's what I've been doing. Not just shadow work, but actually using astrology for shadow work, and particularly intensely from the last 10 years. And other than that, I just want to briefly introduce myself. I'm Maya. My name is Maya, and you can find me at darkamaterials.com. I'm an astrologer, but also, well, I haven't yet come up with a name for what else I do, but I do services that I'll talk at the end if I had time. Hopefully I will. A few words to say about other stuff I do as well as astrology. And it's all geared towards working with your shadow. Help you do your own shadow work, help you do shadow work, and help you integrate shadow. Let me first, as I like to kind of start by giving you an overview of how, what's happening, what's going to be coming, and in what order. So I will start by talking a little bit about shadow and shadow work. So my definition, my understanding, and what I mean by those terms. So we're on the same page. And then I'll dive into the astrology of shadow work, for shadow work, and shadow work. So I'll be looking at, I have identified a set of mostly archetypes, but essentially kind of places in one's chart where shadows, in my experience and study and experience as an astrologer, but also as a person myself, where shadows loom the largest. So I'll be identifying them and I'll be talking about them, but I'll also be doing that kind of contextualizing within key milestones, astrologically speaking, that we all go through. Some of them very much informed by our own personal experience, living through them and surviving them and thriving. And all along, so these are kind of three threads of my narrative that I'll be interweaving. That's the word, right? A lot of books recommendations. So I want to leave you at the end with a lot of references and sort of my wisdom, if I may say so, to then go and just dive further deep into that, or maybe even work with me. And then, like I say, if I have the time, which I will, I'm kind of quite good on keeping to the deadlines or whatever, I'll give you some ideas about what I do and how I do it. Okay, so what is a personal shadow? A shadow is parts of ourselves, our feelings, our ways of being that we hid from others because we learned that those parts were unwelcome by those we depended on for our survival and our well-being. And this is typically, our parents to begin with, and so on. So what did we do? We suppressed, we rejected, and disowned those parts. We moved them as far away from our conscious awareness as possible in the hope to never see them again. But the longer we starved them of our attention, as well as acceptance and affection, the more terrifying and potentially dangerous they became. So I'll be coming back to this theme of danger and fear throughout. So I'll be referring back to this. But let me move to the next one. So that's shadow. But what is shadow work? In a nutshell, really, the shadow work is the work of integrating your shadow. So I want to offer you a couple of definitions, and then essentially the rest of the presentation will be me giving various examples and methods of what that is, and I'll go into the stages and I'll elaborate from my perspective. But I want to start with the ultimate authority, I think, on shadow and integration of it, who's Carl Jung. I suspect that most of us here wouldn't at least know who he is. Maybe I'm not expert on him, but I have certainly studied his, I didn't read his writing so much, but I read about his writing and about his psychology and of archetypes and all that. So I want to start with his definition of what shadow integration is. So shadow integration cannot take place and be put to a useful purpose unless one can admit the tendencies bound up with the shadow and allow them some measure of realization, tempered, of course. This leads to disobedience and self-disgust, but also self-reliance, without which individuation is unthinkable. So some really heavy, strong words here in the last sentence in particular. Disobedience, self-disgust, but also self-reliance. Now, these are this is already a language of archetypes that I'll be then addressing later and identifying astrologically speaking. But just briefly, if it's necessary, maybe just to shed some clarity on this. So disobedience would be the moment that when we start feeling and realizing what our shadow is and starting working or doing our shadow work, we very soon, well, I did, some maybe take a bit longer, come at a point where we just, the feeling like we had enough. We had enough not being who we are, not doing our thing, not saying what we really mean, not speaking our truth. So that's the kind of disobedience piece. Self-disgust is something I would put before disobedience. It comes as a, when you realize what your shadows are, when you face them, often we are disgusted, like, really, is that really me? Do I really feel and think like that? But this path of shadow integration, that's the beauty of it, leads us to self-reliance, without which individuation is unthinkable. And individuation is the word of the age of Aquarius. It's, Aquarius, the ultimate individual, the most emancipated individual, or human being, or highest expression of ourselves. The whole. Now, the whole theme is going to be mentioned in the Wikipedia's definition of individuation, which is that it is a process where the individual self develops out of an undifferentiated unconscious, i.e. shadow. And if the process is successful, the shadow is integrated over time into a well-functioning whole. An individual is essentially etymology of the word is indivisible. Individual is someone who is whole, who has become whole. So this is a big theme for doing the Aquarian age well. And it's what I am very passionate about. Now, what I want to clarify at the outset, at least because I feel that there is still out there potentially, maybe this is not clear, or maybe people are still not sure, or I've seen evidence that there is one thought of what shadow when it's integrated looks like, and I don't agree with that. So I want to just clarify where I stand with what I mean by shadow integrated. So it's not a perfection of Angelina Jolie kind, who is stunning and beautiful, and I'm using this just as a symbol, as a metaphor, not that, no comment on any individual used here, but just as a symbol. So if she's a symbol of stunning beauty and perfection as perceived conventionally, then that's not shadow integrated. That's not the aim. The aim, in my experience, on my view, is the other picture here. This is Melanie Gaydos. She's a model, fashion model, and I would imagine that most people would agree that she doesn't come under the conventional beauty. She wouldn't be considered conventionally beautiful, and yet she is beautiful. And I played here with words just to kind of point out how language is beautiful and powerful and useful. So perfection is what I'm saying. It's not. When we integrate shadow, we don't become perfect, but we do become perfect in our own unique way. So if Melanie is considered imperfect, if you think about it, when you split the word, you get I am perfection, and I love that. So I mean, it's my little moment here. I just needed to put it out there because I think it's just beautiful, and that to me is a shadow integrated, when you're perfect because you have become fully you. You have finally, come all together, and that's never perfect and smooth and all that. So now, why bother? I mean, this is not fun and it's not easy. So why bother? And I think this is particularly pertinent, possibly even not a popular message at this point in time in our history, especially with everything that's going on. But I will offer it to you, and it's coming from Carl Jung, and I completely endorse it, if you like. I mean, he's not commenting on today's culture and this world we live in, but you'll see it's it's applicable, I would say. So as to answer why bother doing shadow work, if you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all his projections, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. Such a man has saddled himself with new problems and conflicts. He has become a serious problem to himself, as he's now unable to say that they do this or that, they are wrong. and they must be fought against. Such a man knows that whatever is wrong in the world is in himself. Now, I'm just getting goosebumps when I read this. And if he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he has done something really good or real for the world. He has succeeded in shouldering at least a small part of the gigantic unsolved social problems of our day. I mean, doing your own shadow work, your own, that's the key, your own, really does bring peace on earth. I know it's such a blanket statement and it's huge, but I will stand by it till the end of my living days. So you can come and find me if you want some reassurance or confirmation or, you know, endorsement or encouragement on this topic. But yeah, so the key, why bother with shadow work? Because that's how we clean up this planet, not just ecologically, but politically, culturally, on every level, psychically, energetically. Do your own work. And only after that, the ripple of that work will be far cleaner energy, you know, rippling out of you. But then even when you actually then act out of that place of having done your own shadow work, your actions will be cleaner. And when I say cleaner, I do not mean morally cleaner. I am Pluto in Virgo, but I'm not moralizing here. I mean clean as in it's not sticky, it's not full of, you know, like a woundingness and, you know, wounds and whatever. Okay, so hopefully I'll have, with this impassioned piece, speech moment, I have inspired you to do your own shadow work with my help or the help of astrology. So in the years I have been doing this, and as for myself, but also as an astrologer with clients, but also I've done a lot of coaching and mentoring in my, by now, quite long life. I have identified 11 stages of shadow work. They're obvious, but I'd like to just kind of, sometimes when something's obvious and we tend to then take it for granted, and it tends to thin out and gets thinner as whatever that thing that we consider obvious, and therefore becomes ineffective. So it's kind of good to remind ourselves of whatever it's obvious occasionally. So if this is it, then let me do this for you. So bringing awareness to it is a first stage or first step. And that's just the moment when we arrive at this kind of feeling and realization that something's off, something's wrong, there's a problem. We don't know how, but we don't know, we can't really pinpoint, we can't identify, we don't know what it is, but it's bugging us and it's really, you know, pressing on us, weighing on us, holding us back, causing us, you know, heartache, misery, suffering, pain, you name it. So that's us becoming aware of our shadow, but we don't know yet what it is. So I highlighted the points where my services, or astrology services are particularly useful. So this is the stage where we all tend to, and I'm sure you will relate to this, we'll turn to someone like an astrologer or any kind of other modality or therapist when we just need what it is that is bothering us, that it's, you know, in our way. And with that help, we enter the stage 2, which is whoever we came for that help, like let's say astrology, you come to me to read your chart and I illuminate those shadows for you. You can now see them, you can face them. So that's stage 2. Usually when you face it for the first time, it can be quite like, you need a bit of a moment to orientate yourself and just kind of, you know, steady yourself. And once you arrive at that kind of steadier place, you can then sit with it. Sitting with it is a kind of like just getting used to what you're seeing. If you've ever been in the pitch black darkness in the woods, like from the light to dark, and you can adjust, it takes a little while to adjust. It looks all pretty pitch black, but then you actually start to see the shapes. That's the sitting with it. You faced it, but now you're kind of defining it, like where does it end? What is it? You're giving it a bit of shape visually. And then you get to the stage 4, which is the first proper tough stage, which is now feeling all the feelings that are from that interaction. So, you know, that you're experiencing. And why it's tough? Because at this stage, most often, and I again speak from experience, like I always do, there is a lot of grief can come out. And that I know that when I was once years ago, first looking into this kind of, that was at that stage, and I was said to an astrologer I had at the time, I said, I'm scared. I'm scared that I will die from all the grief. My heart will break. I will die. And she said, no, you won't, obviously. But my point is, yeah, the fear of going there was that I knew some immense grief awaited me, and it did. And I survived and thrived at the end. So feeling all of it, and then you go. So after you're still not bringing any thoughts or other rationalizing, intellectualizing, even language, if you can help it, until all those feelings are felt, at least kind of the first wave, if you like. And then you start engaging with it. That's when you start using language and your mind. And I personally journal, and I love talking to myself. So another tip, if journaling or writing isn't your thing, go in front of the mirror and have a good chat with yourself. It's just phenomenal. I love it. I do it regularly. Or any other way of basically engaging with your shadow, which means, like I said, talking to it, asking it questions. And then stage 6, listening to it. Now, this is really meaty, because what happens, I mean, for me, in terms of the actual sound, I always hear my voice, like this voice you hear too. Not like in my head, right? But so you may too, I would imagine this is kind of common. But what you'll notice, and I'm sure if you're already doing this, you know what I'm talking about. You will notice that those sentences, those answers are not yours. They're actually, oh, that was actually my parent used to say this to me, or my teacher, or my, first best friend, or my sibling, or my boss. Meaning, these are conditionings we received as little ones, and then later on we are kept allowing various conditioning, various people, various philosophies, various views and philosophies, like you can recognize your teachers, your gurus, your mentors, your spiritual this or the other. But you also start to hear your own voice in relation, like you would use those other voices to distinguish what is yours within that whole theme. And that's when you'll start to feel your heart crack, compassion coming to you, because you will start to see this. You will come forth, the inner child, maybe, or maybe if it's not that back in the childhood time, you as you, but you will recognize your words and your voice that you neglected for so long. And that, like I say, it breaks your heart, but in the sense of like, you all of a sudden have all this love pouring out of you. You essentially want to hug this you that you're finally, removing from all of the conditioning. And in doing that, there is acceptance that comes. And once you kind of been a bit through that, so all these stages, like I say, stay in them for a while at least, reclaiming happens. Now, when you're looking at this list, you might think like, why reclaiming different to owning? In case you do, the difference is, the way I see it is, reclaiming is, it's like, it's been yours always. You just forgot it, or you denied it, or you, like I said, rejected it. So you're reclaiming it, and you're going, no, this is me. This is actually me. So at this stage, this is the last 2 steps before integration happens, are the toughest, because now the time is to take this work out into the real world. And it's not like, you don't just like decide, today I'm going to do that. It happens because now you reclaimed it. All of a sudden you are this person more so than you ever have been, because it's come forth. And you might notice, but you don't want to show it because it's too early. You're too fragile, you're too vulnerable still. It's early, right? So you want to be selective who you reveal this to. Because you don't want to undo all the good work you've done up to this point, because if you come across someone who's quite harsh or insensitive or starts offering advice or something, you might just kind of go backward as opposed to, so you lose momentum, if you like. So this is, at this point, there's a service I'll talk about at the end that I offer that can help you with this. So choose who you're going to reveal this side of you. And then what happens is that you, for the first time, you let another person's gaze fall on that part of you that never seen another person's gaze. Yeah, the power of that. And I've been on the receiving end of this, and also in my work with others, I gave this. It's just nothing like it. And it just empowers you. And also it's an exercise in self-trust. And then the last stage before integration. So after this selective revealing, you go, you just all of a sudden, like, that's it. You just feel more settled and properly, like, another word for owning would be embodying it, but I'm Moon Capricorn owning, and Taurus, I just like prefer owning. So you just become it. And now it's visible. Now you can't even kind of be selectively revealing it. Now it's there. So what happens is that, and this is the toughest, so the selective and that owning is the toughest, meaning you will, and I see this still everywhere and in my life, but yeah, is that there is so much residue of our inability to, or our struggle to be okay with the world not accepting us for who we are and how we are. However, maybe wonky, as long as we're not illegal or doing some harm to others, what's the problem? And yet there is a big problem, with those parts being accepted, particularly often by the ones that are dearest and closest to us, because they're used to certain ways of us, and now this is threatening to them. So at this stage, you can do all this on your own, obviously. So you'll have to endure. So not to undo this work you've done so far. Now you need to keep pushing and just enduring this rejection, disapproval, judgment, all the kind of negative feedback you'll be getting. And so that's what I mean, but it's the toughest. And it's as you go about your life and day, it's like hits you left, right, and center when you need it, when you expect it the least, which is why I offered another service, which I'll talk about at the end, where you can use it like a gym to get these muscles stronger so that you can withstand these reactions and that are, challenging, to say the least. And if after a while doing that, you have integrated it. Okay, so that's it, stage 11. And now astrology. So why use astrology for shadow work? In a nutshell, astrology is a language of archetypes. That's why. So why, the question then becomes, why use astrology? What's helpful about the language of archetypes? And I love this quote by Richard Rudd. So the language of archetypes allows us to look into the hidden side of our nature, shadow, right? To step into the underworld of the collective unconscious, collective shadow, without becoming personally identified with what we see there. And this is the key. That's why I put in bold, if you can see. Because why we fear doing shadow work, why we resist it, why we really don't want to do it, is because it's scary. And the fear, what we're scared of, big chunk of it is our own personal, because we neglected it, like I said at the very beginning of the presentation, and it kind of becomes, it's hostile to us, and we know it. It's making our life miserable, and we have addictions, we have, all kinds of other problems because we have neglected this part of ours, but it's ours. And yet it's still scary, we get that. But the bigger piece of fear and terror even is that we are faced with the collective unconscious, the epic mythical themes of evil and good battles, and that's just around the corner, our unconscious. That's the shadow work, that's a big part of shadow work. That's why the fear is big to do it. And so when we use archetypes, when we use the language of archetypes, i.e. astrology, because archetypes are essentially metaphors, of human, all these spectrum of human emotion, and being and who we are and how we are. The metaphor gives us that kind of a bit of a distance, so we have that gap to see it. It feels safe. That's why we love watching, reading fairy tales. We love astrology. We love listening to mythology and the stories. Because the bigger the better, because we can live our shadow safely. And so the thing is, happen easily, that we use it as an escape. So we kind of binge watch on Netflix, Buffy the Vampire, or Dracula, BBC latest adaptation, fantastic, highly recommend it. And we're done. We have kind of let this shadow of ours to play, and then we packed it back in and we go back to our work or whatever. But so we use this mythic archetypal language as an escapism. Even astrology can become that. We just go there to kind of like, oh, aren't I just this Lilith, amazing creature, wild woman, just to have a bit of venting space. But actually the real art and the real trick is to be very conscious of that. And I'm sure we all are, who are here, and many, but in case you're not, just remember to journal on the back of these amazing trips to those, lands of fantasy and myth and archetype. What was it about that Dracula that got you so excited? Why do you love it so much? If you do, and I did. Okay, so now I'm going to the meat in a moment, but as I always like to kind of give you the end before I get there, in the sense that this is, if you take anything away from today, from what I'm saying, in terms of how you use astrology for your shadow work, take these two tips. First, whenever you're reading about your own personal astrology, so your own planets, your own, like you have this planet in the house and it's in that sign and it aspects this other planet and whatever, whenever you're reading anything about your personal astrology, prioritize your own reactions to what you're reading. Particularly pay attention to things you intensely dislike and the things you adore, you love too much, you just love about what you're reading. Those are two sure, absolute fail-safe signposts to your shadow, highways to your shadows. And when I go into the detail of the archetypes, you'll see which ones are which. So that's first tip. And the second tip is focus. So whenever you pick up, again, article about your personal astrology, focus on negative traits and descriptions of your personal astrology. So go to the descriptions that are unfavorable, that are, something you just kind of like not necessarily feeling that proud on the surface, because you're conditioned to think like that about these traits. So go there, and then again, watch your responses and spend some time with what you are, how you're responding to what you're reading, and then, stay with that, journal, go there. That's your signpost to your shadow. A fantastic book. So here we come with book recommendations. This is my Bible. It's literally by the bed. And I read it, well, maybe not daily. Anyway, it's by Ren Butler. So another tip for the rest of this presentation, just keep taking screenshots, because I read this myself, but I know the titles. So if you can't, that's a good way. Take a screenshot and then you can zoom in. So The Archetypal Universe by Ren Butler. I suppose it is an astrology, book, but it's not your typical astrology book. It's so deep, it's so rich. It's like, oh my God, it keeps giving. It's just amazing. And it has proper solid sections on shadow and some more. Amazing. You must, if you're serious about using astrology for your shadow work, this is the one you must have in your library. So here's kind of like, again, in a very nutshell-y thing, what I'm going to be now exploring a little bit more. So like I said, I'm going to be weaving two strands, and there will be a third little pocket that I'll start in a minute with. But the two strands are these. On one hand, I'm looking at astrological stages of shadow work. So they're before first Saturn return, time before, after first Saturn return, Uranus opposition, Chiron return, and second Saturn return. Now myself, I'm in the middle of my Chiron return. I had two more hits, still 2022, I'm in it. So I'm talking like from the trenches, from the front line, and then have great plans for second Saturn return. And then I'm looking at how certain parts of our chart interact with these stages. So I'm saying parts and not archetypes, because there is South Node here, which is so big in this storyline. South Node is not an archetype. If anyone thinks any other way, I'd love to know, but I can't bring myself to call it archetype. Maybe I'm very wrong there. But so South Node, and then archetypes: Moon, Venus, Saturn, and Chiron. And so those are the archetypes and the parts in our chart where, in my experience and my wisdom of living astrologically, shadows loom the largest, and I'll talk about why. And then, but I'm also going to offer what I think is the kind of place in our chart where we get all the help we need for doing the shadow work of our own, and then also how we can be of help to others to do their own shadow work, which is 12th house. Sorry, the answer's already there. So the help comes from the 12th house. And it's at this point that I'd like to introduce my bias, which is what I always like to bring forth. This is a great way to learn astrology as well, when someone shows you their chart and then you observe them and you just kind of go, so this is what they have, and I wonder if that's that. So there's a tip there for you as well, which is partly why I do it, but also because it's important to know that it's my own take on something, and these are my filters. So as you can see, I have a full 12th house. Well, not full, but yeah, quite full. And then the other section of the yellow highlight is the rulers of the 12th house. So what do you do with 12th house? We all have it. You might not have planets in it, but don't despair just as yet. You still have all the help you need. So first, if you have planets in the 12th house, those are the archetypes that you are really comfortable in their shadow expressions, as in you're not scared of their shadows, as in they're familiar to you, you feel at home, you feel safe, because shadow work is scary and it's, so, but you feel safe. Whatever you have in 12th house is where you feel safe, and you have an innate, like a 12th house, like you're finally attuned to the shadows of those archetypes, and you see them like straight, straight through, if you like. So whatever you have in 12th house, it's your natural talent to understand the shadow of those archetypes, and to feel at home with them. So if you don't have a planet, you have a sign. So if you, let's say, just have Aries it rules your 12th house, or you have two signs in there, you could have an intercepted sign. So you'd have both two archetypes, even though you haven't got planets. Then you want to look at, and I'll give you in a moment books and resources to use for this. You then look at, so Aries is Mars, Pisces is Neptune. So you look at those planets in 12th house. You study it like that. And then the second piece to this is the ruler of the 12th house. So where you have the ruler of the 12th house is like your shadow playground. So it's where you, so let's say if you had a ruler of the 12th house in 3rd house, then you are really good at, you could be like having workshops how people could write and work through their shadow stuff through writing, because 3rd house is maybe writing, right? So yeah. And I'll have it in 7th and 8th, and I'm not going to go there anymore because of the time. But you see what I mean with the 12th house, why it's good, why it's helpful. Sorry. So some more on that, just briefly. So 12th house, I see it and feel it. It's actually a safe house. It is a house of shadows, mirrors, and projections, which is why we're at home in shadow world and shadowland in 12th house, and whatever we have there, those archetypes in particular, and their shadows. It's a liminal mythic house. It's transpersonal. It's where compassion, forgiveness, and forgetness lives, which helps the compassion and forgiveness. And it's collective unconscious. But this transpersonal and compassion piece rather, are really important when you work with others, but with you as well, obviously. But with others, it's like, that's why I personally as well, with my 7th house ruler of the 12th house, is that I genuinely see shadows, but I feel compassion, deep compassion for people's shadows, deep to the point that that's my shadow. How sometimes I felt that, what I considered I want to hug and give comfort to is a monster. Enough said. So these are the books: Your Secret Self, Tracy Marks, Neptune, 12th House in Pisces by Maurice Fernandez, Depth Astrology by, I can't pronounce the name, Gargatolil, a handbook. This is a whole series of things. They all have sections on shadow part, on the, either houses or particularly 12th house. And then Michelle Fallis, I want to give her a shout out because she's fantastic, on astrofix.net. She has such affordable ebooks of all kinds of stuff, rulers of the houses. So if you don't have anything in the 12th house, you can just check her out and see what your rulers, where they are in your chart. And then 2 fantastic podcast episodes on Todd Jacobs. He has a SoundCloud account or whatever, and he has 2 podcasts that are fantastic: Natal Planets in the 12th house and Living with the Planet in the 12th house. Please, if you want to understand your 12th house and how you can, where your help for working with shadow lies, these are the resources. Okay, so before first Saturn return, we essentially, my take on this is that we are not meant to be doing shadow work. We are meant to living in large. We really are. And we live, I would say we live in our Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and possibly Jupiter. He's too good a dude, cool dude not to be hanging out with, but it's really those first 5 or however many I said. So we are very sociable. We are You know, we do rely on others in a way that we never will again. Well, I don't know. I would say so. We need each other to kind of get each other, to get ourselves, you know, to understand ourselves better. We are, you know, we live in the sun, you know, we're not in the shadows, and we shouldn't be. That's the point. We still haven't had a Saturn go around the whole thing that is teaching us. Now we are living the shadows in the sense that we 30 years or so. But we don't, you know, we don't need to be concerned just as yet. It's like almost like we won't have anything to do with afterwards if we are too concerned about it. What happens also as we approach Saturn return, we are heading towards Saturn shadow work. And that is then usually typically manifests itself in these desires to make something that's closer. That's like a few years before Saturn return, or maybe just a couple of years. We become very much concerned, like we want to actually do something. We want to leave a mark. We want to, you know, become someone, or we want to settle. We want to give form to this life experience we had up until this point. So YouTube success, I use it as a little thing just to kind of nod to the younger generations. But for us older ones, it would have been, you know, become a manager in my organization or my company. Also, we start thinking about having families, you know, Cancer. So the moon archetype, remember I mentioned earlier, is where the shadows loom large, buying a first house. And so in a sense, up until first Saturn return, we are creating shadow. And so we shouldn't too much worry about it, or rather let yourself off the hook if you're in this category. You'll have plenty of time to do it later, and you'll have stuff to do because you have created a lot of it. So let me just go into each one of them. So the South Node, why is a shadowy kind of where shadows live, a lot of them, dense shadows live in South Node, this is a quote from Jan Spiller. The South Node depicts an aspect in our character that has been overemphasized in past lives and thus tends to take over the personality in this lifetime and throw us off balance. When we are acting without awareness, we tend to act out the South Node position in response to our environment, because we have been accustomed to that approach working to our advantage. So this is the piece. The YouTube success that I talked about is we have such an arsenal of talents and skills that come so naturally to us, South Node, right? We bring all that into this life, but it's like we've done it to death and back, literally. And you know you're in your South Node, stuck in it, you overdone it this time around again, is when you feel drained. And that's the sign, you know, there's nothing, you're running on empty. So I put here, so this is a great book, Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller, absolute must for understanding your South Node and the North Node, obviously. But also what I wanted to mention here, I use Lance Armstrong. It's not for his astrology, I don't know his astrology, but it's a perfect kind of in action South Node, how not to do it. And like I said, he may not be doing his South Node, that I don't know, but just bear with me. So he's famous for winning like for quite a few years, like a trophy in races or something. And then it was discovered, bicycle racing, I think, Tour de France. And then it was discovered that he had used enhancing drugs. So he was stripped of his titles and all these trophies. My point here is that with South Node, we identified so much, and it used to bring us a lot of goodies. And we just can't let, even this time around, until the first Saturn return. So we tend to kind of trip ourselves up on it, like Lance Armstrong, just as a metaphor, not as a real South Node story. So Moon, Cancer, 4th house. I'm sorry, my throat is these days not the best, so hopefully I'm clear. So why Moon, Venus, Saturn, and Chiron? Although, why I think that the shadowiest, densest shadow making archetypes is because they're relational. We depend on the feedback we are getting. We are very much reliant on it. So as the Moon's Cancer 4th house, it's the mother, it's the sort of where we feel the safest. So it's the surroundings outside of us that define that sense of safety and comfort and happiness. So in that sense, it's relational. So anything we feel threatens that, it's our projected shadow. So if you want to, if you're use astrology to do your shadow work, look at your moon. And this is a very good book. Amy Herring, Astrology of the Moon. She actually has sections, like quite lengthy sections on the shadow and the rest of the stuff. But also I want to invite you to kind of, this is a bit, maybe tongue-in-cheek of me, but I like it, and to really challenge your moon, to read the dialectic of sex. And when I say your moon, just your sense of whatever makes you safe. So it is your moon, but it might not be in Cancer, obviously. It might not be in fourth house. But what Shalomit Fayasov does in this book, she challenges the core of our structure, society, Saturn, but it's still moon as well because it rests on that bottom of the chart, any structure, family unit, and she tears it to bits. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with her. She's one of my idols. So yeah, if you want to kind of get this, to follow your reactions to someone's radical thinking on family and safety and, this unit that we have romanticized over the centuries, read this book and challenge your moon, Cancer placements or fourth house. Venus is another archetype that I think if you're working, astrology shadow work, go to your Venus to understand your shadow. Your relational shadow. So why I'm talking about Urania, Libra, 7th house Venus as opposed to Taurus, I just want to quote, semi-quote, like edited quote by Erin Sullivan in her book Retrograde Planets, fantastic book. So Libra Venus is refined, idealized, cerebral, and wholly socialized. The Taurian Venus is sensual, primitive, and has instinctual responses to stimuli in gut reactions and feelings about sensory perceptions. The instinctual responses of Libra Venus is overlaid with socially acquired concerns about morality, social acceptability, politeness, or properness. This Venus, will judge whether these automatic responses, the instincts of the body, are nice or not, and she will subordinate her deepest, truest needs for socially acceptable values. So this is really the definition of shadow, is that we will do anything to hide parts of ourselves that are not acceptable because we just, it's an existential fear. It's like, is it ever safe to be completely, to not rely on acceptance, the safety is in numbers, that's possibly Libra's, they came up with it or something. I don't mean Libra people, I just mean it's a kind of flavor of Libra, safety in numbers. So that's why we, the fear of being unaccepted or rejected by the rest is because we can be, alone with, are we going to survive? So you can take it as far down deep as that. And this is the whole, how we are building that shadow before Saturn return, with all the, just enjoying, friends and just doing the good stuff, the stuff that makes us and everyone else around us, but us, because everyone else is approving of what we're doing, just, amplifies the happy vibe, the good vibe and whatever. Now, just, this is the piece, the book that I recommend. It's not astrology. And I'm also offering you this painting by Rubens. Venus in History of Art is painted mostly, the iconography of it is mirror. But if you watch carefully, she's hardly ever looking at herself in the mirror. She's always looking at who's ever. So in this one, she's looking at me because I'm looking at the mirror. So Venus is all about, she doesn't exist if there's not another to reflect it back to her. So this dependency or codependency, the shadow of Libra. In fact, someone on Zoom meetings recently, I watched with pleasure a presentation on Pluto in Libra. That's the codependency shadow. So that's the Venus, shadow. So find this book if any of this resonates, particularly if it triggers you. When Nietzsche Wept, by Irvin D. Yalom. Yalom, so D is the initial, Yalom. It's about Nietzsche, but it is like a fictional account of his life, but more like his relationship to this woman, I cannot remember her name now, who he was in love with but never consummated, if I understand correctly, and it doesn't matter, the relationship. But basically he's a sun in Libra and Pluto opposite by 1 degree, almost exact opposition in Aries. So if there is a book and if there is a philosopher out there who's really digging into this Libra Aries archetype and me, you, individuality and dependency and codependency, it's Nietzsche. And this book is hardcore. It's actually, even for me, it was actually not easy to read, but it's amazing. So very, very triggering and challenging. So yeah, highly recommend. And then we come to the first Saturn return. And now we have built up the shadow of the planets that I just talked about, the Moon, the Venus, and the South Node, which is not a planet, and we arrived at a point where we're now making something of ourselves. We have enough experience and enough stuff that we have created and we have accumulated, if you like, and it's kind of almost built us up to a pinnacle of in our life in some form or another. It doesn't have to be corporate or business or anything, but I'm just using it as metaphors. And then the return happens. So we are at first I don't know for how long, obviously this is individual, but at first we're struggling with the Saturn archetype in the sense of, as it is in this picture depicted, eating his children. That's mythology of it. Is basically he feared, there was a prophecy that he will be thrown off his throne, whatever, by one of his children, so he ate them all. And then forgot that his wife will actually be on the side of his children, and she spared Uranus, and then anyway. But the point is, why is he eating children? He does not want to let go what he's accumulated up until this point. So that's where we are trapped in this a little bit. And yet, this is what really is happening underneath. So this kind of moment of like tipping in the run-up to and soon after. I absolutely adore this quote. You may have not heard about Alice Kohler, and I'll mention her at the end in a different context, in a Saturnian context. She's another one of my idols. So the quote of hers is, "Being solitary is being alone well. Being alone, luxuriously immersed in doings of your own choice, aware of the fullness of your own presence, rather than of the absence of others, because solitude is an achievement." Now, I mean, if this isn't Saturn at its most refined and most wisest, I don't know what is. And I don't know her chart. I don't know hardly anything about this scholar, but that's a side point. So, but this is not a loud message at the Saturn return point, but it's like you start to feel the undercurrent. It's like that starts to seep and permeate your reality more and more. This sense of aloneness, but almost a desire, or not almost, as well as a desire. So aloneness and separateness, but the desire to actually be alone, to really kind of start sinking into your own container and feel your way around it, as opposed to worry too much about the outside world. But as I just said, up until that point, we have lived to build something up. Now we are kind of asked to go down. And it's quite disorientating. And in my world, literally the lights went off. Like I had the black and white world, or rather like a sepia world. Up until that was like on those pictures I shared with you. It's like, it was like literally being forced in, and it's not as colorful because it's darkish. So the book to read as you hit your Saturn return, to have it as a Bible by your bed, another Erin Sullivan book, Saturn in Transit. It's the hero's journey. She maps it out beautifully. I mean, she writes beautifully, but still, it's so rich with just depth and philosophy and astrology. So this is a must if you're approaching your Saturn return, or if you are already gone past it. At any point, you can just map it back. Phenomenal. Some other reading suggestions. Robert Bly, absolute must for any shadow worker out there. You're not one if you haven't read it. A little book on the human shadow, beautiful. He's a poet, so beautifully written. Another beautifully written by Thomas More, Dark Nights of the Soul. Even if you haven't had a dark night of the soul, or you're not in it, read it. It just shows you the darkness for what it is, the beauty that it is, the nurturing soil that it provides for our growth, for our depth. Like, it's not just about growing. You can't grow if you don't have the roots to go deep somewhere deep and dark, So that growth upward, it's really reciprocal, identically reciprocal, that's the right word, to the depth. And you need that depth and the darkness, and this is the time, and these are the books. Greek mythology, obviously, by Robert Graves, classic, or any kind of, nowadays you go Google any myth and you get it there. But if you like books like I do, then you might want to get that one. And then this is another beauty, possibly no one's heard of it, but Howard Axelrod, and The Point of Vanishing, a memoir of 2 years in solitude, and he, a young man, became blind by an accident, and in his 20s, and decides to go into the woods blind, and lives on his own for 2 years in this beautiful somewhere in America, Canada, I'm not sure, some wilderness. Oh my God, stunning, stunning. You can just feel the richness of solitude in a human being. But yeah, I'll just get too excited about these things. So between first Saturn return and Uranus opposition, we are working through Saturn shadow, or we are working the Saturn shadow, our Saturn shadow, or the Saturn shadow, both and either. We hit Uranus opposition, and then between Uranus opposition and Chiron return, we are working the Chiron shadow. But let me tell you first the Uranus opposition experience. So it is like lightning strikes, and it's so like me, if you're like me, who loves drama and just like intense experiences, I loved it. It was like this first picture here, like this. Literally, someone just like pushed me out, and I just was out. And it was like, whoa, where was I? And you kind of Prometheus here, the second picture, you do the experience and that freeingness and that sense of it's also like, and all the Saturn stuff that you've been working on, you all of a sudden have all this stuff you want to tell the world. You want to just like a Prometheus, I'm going to enlighten you, but also you're being enlightened, and you can be a bit of a nuisance to others, I found. But also what happens is that, so basically it's an invitation to celebrate the weirdo in you, get your freak on, you know, whatever. And it's a time to experiment and really push those boundaries of who you are and how you are. And like in these collages, these are the Uranus opposition art, but your art, your identity art, like who are you as an identity? It is an artwork, and how are you going to compose yourself? And you play, but it's that kind of, you really start to feel like detached from you in a sense, so you can play with all this. However, hence the Chiron, essentially you're working through your Chiron shadow at this point. You are constantly coming up against and being knocked down painfully, but Uranus thankfully gets you up, and you kind of not care, but I don't know if you're learning. Well, you're just in the middle of it. And so doing all this weird stuff, you will come across a lot of rejection, a lot of like, what are you doing, you know, and just disapproval and all the rest that, you know, people are like, how dare you, you know, stand out, you know, who do you think you are, kind of thing. And that's Chiron, that's a rejection, essentially wound, the Chiron wound. You're experiencing, you're working through your Chiron, you all of a sudden will be very much feeling your Chiron from your Uranus opposition time to your Chiron return time. So essentially, what is Chiron Shadow Work reading? Fantastic book by Tom Jacobs, Chiron 2012 and the Aquarian Age. It's on Amazon and on his website. Chiron and the Healing Journey, Melanie Reichardt Bible. You got to have that one. And then get someone who you think it's amazing, freak, weirdo, that you adore because they're just uncompromisingly themselves, and then read everything about them, spend time, even if it's virtually with them or in your world as you were, not literally with them. And for me, it was David Lynch. I mean, and I'll just say, I won't say more than that. If it's your thing, you'll know what I mean. If it's not, it doesn't matter then. Just find your David Lynch, your weirdo that you admire. And then Uranus opposition reading books are, Prometheus the Awakener by Richard Tarnas, Mark Jones, Healing the Soul. It's about Pluto and nodes by Uranus as well. Jeffrey Wall is a really good one. It's very much about that Uranus opposition time and midlife crisis, as it's called, or whatever. Howard Sasportas, The Gods of Change. This is transits, and Uranus is as Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Uranus transits only. Fantastic book. And then the other three I just brought as so the two that I would definitely recommend anyone is The Art of Being Unmistakable by Srinivas Rao, and the other one, The Art of Nonconformity by Chris Guillebaud. They're just like, if you need encouragement and support to feel like it's okay to just be you no matter what. And in fact, it's your duty to be you no matter what. And that's Uranus opposition, but Uranus message in general, Aquarian, Uranus. And then Playing to the Gallery by Grayson Perry, one of my favorite artists. it's because he's an English artist. He's very dry wit and down to earth. Just love him. Very smart and sharp. But why I bring you here, the artist archetype is the ultimate individual. It's the ultimate. It's the archetype of freedom, and that's Uranus, and that's Uranus opposition calling you to be free. So pick an artist of your desires, heart's desires, and then investigate them. How do they get up every morning and do their thing, no matter what, whether they're going to be recognized or whether they're going to make a living, do the Saturn stuff, just get inspiration throughout the Uranus opposition time to your Chiron return. And we come to Chiron return. I know you said, Linda, that I have a little bit more than an hour, so hopefully that's okay. So Chiron return, and so these two images are really what it's about. And like I say, I'm speaking from the trenches, from the front line. So if you've done, Uranus opposition has been pushing you to be your unique self, but you had to, so Saturn, Uranus, and Chiron is the road from one to the other. Without Chiron, there is no Aquarian age, there is no Uranus, there is no doing Uranus well, there is no 11th house, a good 11th house, if you don't do your Chiron. And if you don't do your Chiron shadow, which is essentially everything you fear being rejected on is your Chiron shadow. So this journey between Uranus opposition and the Chiron return has been you flexing your muscle and just getting, really bashed by your Chiron, even though it's Uranus opposition, but you've been bashed by your Chiron. So when the Chiron return happens, you are ready to walk it. You are ready to, what the Chiron is? The Chiron is the archetype of a maverick. Chiron is not the wounded healer. I know I'm saying the heresy maybe here. And yes, there's that storyline, of course. But I think we really all right to just be done with that mythology and actually consider it as a maverick, because he's a maverick. It's like he's got an elliptic, is utterly unpredictable. They just, so it's like you can't brand it, you can't define it, you can't pin it down. That's astronomy, but also therefore, astrology and mythology of it is that it's a maverick archetype. So at this point in your life, from the Uranus opposition in particular, because you've done your Saturn shadow during your Saturn return and then to your Uranus opposition, and then from Uranus opposition to your Chiron, you've been training to be a maverick and to do your thing. And then as Chiron return happens, you start doing it. And I'm speaking from experience. And so I want to just read this quote here. To find out what is truly individual in ourselves, profound reflection is needed. And where do you do profound reflection? In solitude. Saturn, the beautiful quote I read earlier. And suddenly we realize how uncommonly difficult the discovery of individuality in fact is. And this is the tough truth that we just don't want really to know, or we don't want it to be true. And so what I mean by this is, like, I think we all want to be these little sheep here. It's just such a cute little sheep, and we all want to be proud that we're individuals, that we're unique, because we know we are. But it's really not just like, it's not surface stuff. It's proper inside stuff that you need to feel so alone and separate from the rest to be unique, to rather define your uniqueness. Yeah. And I don't think we're there yet, anywhere near. But if we can kind of start thinking like that, and that's what the Aquarian age will be about. So I got a bit carried away because this is just this is everything I'm about. Sorry. So now I don't know this, but this is what I imagine. So after your Chiron return, you go your own way, you go it alone, you do your own thing, you do it alone. This doesn't mean that you are poor, lonely little thing, isolated. No, you still have everything you have, all your relationships, all your whatever you want to have, but you do it irrespective and independent of their approval, of their support, of their network, of their connection. None of that. Unless your literal life depends on it, you do not need that reliance on someone else. You don't. Like I said, unless your life depends on it. So that's your Chiron. That's your Chiron return, and you've done it well if that's what you're doing at that point in your life. Second, so what they say, and I can't remember who said this, but so I'm sorry if it's one of you. I don't know. Anyway, I've heard it somewhere and I loved it, which is that at the Chiron return point, between Chiron return and your second Saturn return, you are figuring out what kind of elder you want to be at the time of your second Saturn return. So, or crone, right? It's really, you become a crone officially at the second Saturn return. Even though I call myself now a little bit because of my hair or whatever, I just like it. But yeah, I'm preparing myself, like, for that time. It's in about 10 years, I think. Anyway, so so from your Chiron return, you want to be, it's almost like, I think in a way, the shadow work is done, in a sense that you're now living your shadow. Well, as in you are this whole person, in theory, right? I'm not there yet, but that's what I'm absolutely aiming for. And I'm going to be done with that by the second Saturn return. So these are the three images I just want to, so the crone kind of archetype in the middle, it's an artwork by Joyce Tennyson. On the left is Ellen Giordano. She's that's what I'm going to be looking like, more or less. And also the eccentric Iris Apfel is where I'm at, meaning you just then do your thing. I mean, I don't know. And she's outrageous and I love her for it. And that's how you want to do your Saturn return, meaning second Saturn return. Not, if that's not you, to be outrageous, but to be loud, obviously not. But it's your version of your own, like back to the early photo I had of that Melanie Gaydos, just your own imperfect, weird, unique setup of who you are and however you are. You want to be that. Absolutely no apologies by second Saturn return for artwork. And so at this point, I'm like, it's not about what to read, it's what to do. So I picked 4 women, and sorry if it's only women. I know I'm a bit gender biased here, and I'm sorry about that. But one of my this lifetime thing is to do my woman the way I want to do my woman. So sorry. So Diana Athill is an English editor, British editor of just books, and so not famous unless you're into books or whatever. But the point I'm making, she wrote. It was one of my, when I was around my Uranus opposition, I was reading this book, and it's just it's a legacy, essentially. That's what I'm trying to say. What to do at this second Saturn return, between Chiron return and second Saturn return, you are creating your legacy. And at that point, you're just leaving it, and you're just like savoring it, So she wrote this book much later in, I think, 80s, probably like a last quarter square, second Saturn Saturn return. But still, it's a matter of legacy. It's an example of legacy. Alice Kohler is a woman, an unknown woman, talking of someone manifesting what they wrote. And I don't think anyone knows. If anyone knows who Alice Kohler is, I would love to know. I found few little bits, but minimal. But she was a philosopher, and she just ended up going to describe solitude. She just wanted solitude, to experience solitude. And I was reading her when I was in my 30s, because I always loved solitude and thought I was weird because of it, and just wanted some examples. Someone else is like me, I'm not so weird. And she was one of those women, and it's an amazing book. I absolutely love it. So it's another kind of legacy piece, although she did this well before, I should think, was her second Saturn return. These other 2 ladies are actual second Saturn return markers. So Rose Hilton, a British artist, she took to making art at 60. So second Saturn return. And so that's it. She just embraced artist, the Uranus, the freedom archetype. And then the other lady, the Legacy Project. Sorry, the other lady here is a woman, Margie Gillis, I think we would pronounce. I don't know. I was just Googling women at the older age. And but I know that, again, at the age of 60 or 59, she was a ballerina or dancer. So her body was giving, like, she couldn't do as much as what she used to do at that age. So she actually created a final piece of her dance. So they went around touring the world, and she was done with her dancing after that. And it's called The Legacy Project by Margie Gillis. And like I say, it happened at her second Saturn return. What a way to wrap up an era or one's, epochal life. And there's still some more to come. So I'm personally so excited about that, with big plans. Okay, I'm 10 minutes over. Just going to briefly touch on my, take a breath, and then tell you about my services and kind of bring all this together as in how I could help you. So like I said, I specialize, my passion, as you can hopefully see, is all shadowy stuff for the reasons I showed. And it's where our gold lies. So if I can help you in any way, get your gold and get your free con, please, I'm your woman. So bringing awareness to it, the beginning of, becoming aware of your shadow, when we usually go to astrology and other modalities, then I do 3 types of readings. So I do natal charts. I do them in 3 formats. I do them in audio and Zoom in person and different lengths, so I can have a price range. So I love my services to be as affordable as possible and as accessible as possible. But at the same time, obviously, I need to charge for my time and all that. So that's why I give quite a range of variety of offers. So natal chart, and it's always just like diving deep into your darkness. And the more you tell me, the more I can identify through your language. I listen to your language. I study history of art as well, but I studied literature and was top end of the class. So I'm really good at kind of listening to language and understanding the nuances and picking up on all kinds of stuff. So I bring that to you kind of to face it, like to enter the second stage of shadow work. I also do my other 2 favorite readings. I don't get as many of these because I don't advertise them as much, but you should really do them. These are just a relationship astrology. So if you have any challenging relationships, which I believe we all do, don't we? I do composite and synastry, but in one reading. So I look at your individual charts of you, the person, and there could be anyone, obviously romantic, but family, colleagues, sisters, anyone, friends, whoever. So look at your individual charts, and then I look at your compatibility, synastry, and then I look at composite. But composite is where it really gets juicy because it's a karmic chart. It's essentially saying, this is the work you and I have signed up to do. Should we choose to do it? Because, when we meet in this lifetime, we might not want to do it. And then I tell you exactly that. That's the kind of the crux of my reading here, is that with relationship charts, is that I kind of really highlight what are you actually well equipped individually to do well together in terms of your composite chart, because individually you're well equipped to do the work together, or what you're not. And actually, would it be more of a distraction of your individual parts, or actually it's really good because it supports your individual parts? So I'll really go into all that. And so, yeah, if that's something you're interested in, please knock on my door. And solar returns are such fun. They're the really light ones. I mean, for me, who goes always deep and dark, these are like quite happy, because it is about your sun and it's about where you're going to shine the brightest. And yes, sun does cast the longest shadows in many ways, but it's somehow they never really feel heavy, because they're not. They're kind of surface level reading. I have in-depth explanation of what solar returns are on my website and on my YouTube channel, so you can read it there as well, or listen to it. Don't want to spend more time on that, but it's great, like a birthday present 3 months in advance. I do 3 charts, like the last year, the one you're about to have, solar return year, and the one after that. So I kind of give you an arc of themes, and obviously looking all of that against your natal chart. And it's quite a meaty reading. And like I say, it's a great present for someone as well, because it's quite light. So there's not too much shadow and darkness. And this is really kind of, although astrology is everything for me, these 2 other pieces of work that I do are just where my heart just explodes. So it's, I don't know what to call it, coaching, mentoring, but it's not astrology. So back to the shadow stages. When you're about to reveal, and you want to be selective who you're revealing what you've done so far, or this darkness you brought up and you want to integrate, you come to me, and I offer witnessing service. So I offer in 2 formats. You can just send an email that's super affordable, and I witness it. So there's no feedback. I don't advise. I don't talk, more or less, really, if we're doing it face to face. In an email, I have a kind of a generic, more like a response, but I read it. It's all on my website. But the point is that you bring something to me because you want me to see it, or you want someone to see this gaze I talked about earlier. You want another human to cast their gaze on you, on this shadowy part of you. And I do that most compassionately, and I hold that space solidly for you. And you come out with deepened self-trust. because you ultimately trust that it's okay to do that, because that's the fear, isn't it, to show your shadow to anyone. And then the other piece, after the owning, or rather as you start owning, before the final piece of integrating it to help you integrate fully, is essentially they're called discomforting that service. And essentially it's about coming to me to give you that challenging feedback that you will be getting from others, so you kind of flex your muscle to withstand that. But in that process, you may also find that actually some of the stuff that you're getting the feedback actually is still further refining your shadow, as in whatever you want to integrate. So you go, oh, actually, you're right, this isn't, what am I on about? This isn't me. I don't want that. But you stick with but it's still possibly uncomfortable for other people, but you actually love it. So I help you do that. That's discomforting process. That's quite intense. And so you kind of need to be, okay with that. It's quite intense, and it's not tough, because with me, it's never tough in the sense that it's always passionately to just give you, but there's no apology. I don't pussyfoot around. I don't cajole you. I don't hold your hand. And none of that. I don't do that. The lovely people who do that, but I'm not for that work. And that's that. And the last piece, the best maybe piece really, is that I offer, and this is a recent idea I had, it's and I love it. I haven't yet seen what response there is, but this is for the rest of my days maybe. It's a free service, because I don't do anything really other than once a week I just do something little. So essentially it's a great thing before during the balsamic moon phase, to let go. I have an email, letgo@darkermaterials.com, at the bottom of the page here. And essentially you just dump whatever you want in that email and you send it. And then you get an auto reply that are crafted carefully with all the right energies and all the right vibes sending your way, as a way of supporting that release and thanking you, and a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness. And then I go in every week and I delete everything. So that's kind of like a further release. And I had some responses, and I personally love it. And so please use it. Please spread that word around, whoever needs it. Make it a dumping ground for whatever you need to just get off your chest, because there's no one else you can say to. I do not read it. It's an absolute privacy. I don't know what Google does. I can't be responsible for that, sorry. But yeah, I do not read it. So it's private. Whatever you said, it's there are a couple of things that say don't, it's not welcome. Read on my website. As in, I don't know. I'll explain there. I don't want to go into it now. But yeah. So I think I've arrived at the end of this. So hopefully this wasn't rushed too much, but I always have so much to say. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions now, however much long time we have, or you can always just email me, or reach me out on Instagram. But yeah, thank you.
Maya, yes, we do have 2 questions. Is that okay?
Great.
Okay,
yes,
great.
Of course.
Actually, 3 questions, if you have time. Can you do 3 or?
Yeah, I have time. Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. From Angela, could you tell us about Lilith? Does she represent our shadow?
Well, I don't know if I can answer it. It's so okay. Let me start from here. Lilith is I don't know if you know, Angela. Is it mythology of Lilith? Lilith is the first wife of Adam, and she just said no to whatever his request was, and she was banished because she said no, and that's the kind of story of womanhood. So I don't. In the context I've been talking about, every archetype has a shadow. Every single one has a shadow expression, and a thick one. But what I was referring to throughout the presentation is where we actively create shadow because we are protecting ourselves from something, or we are keeping something, close to our chest, or protecting, essentially, it's always about. Where with Lilith, really, no, in that context, in the sense rather that I'm talking about it. So I would say Lilith, it's like almost like she's our ally. We call on Lilith when we want to shout, when we want to just F off you. Sorry, but just bring that, anger unapologetically. We call on our Lilith. So, that I wouldn't consider that a shadow. That is a shadow in the sense that, well, other people might not like it, so that's their shadow. But Pluto is the same. Pluto is like the force that we just can't stop. There is shadow in Pluto, but it's like these are our allies to push us through difficult times. where the moon and the archetypes that are used are the ones that are holding us back. So I wouldn't say that Lilith hold us back. Lilith actually is our come on girl, you can do it kind of archetype. Sorry. So I know we have 2 minutes, I don't know about time, so I would leave it at here, but I
Oh,
can elaborate more.
that was a great answer. Thank you. Fantastic. Quickly now, can suppressing the shadow lead to disease?
I believe so. I absolutely believe so. I mean, I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I'm just trying to quickly think of some example of my own. Um, yeah, can't might come to me in a moment, but I would say that essentially, um, my understanding and my view of humanity, or human being, of our soul, is that we are just a lot of energy, dense energy. We are so much energy that we have become a form, right? It kind of like, I'm paraphrasing and simplifying something possibly more complex and more nuanced. But so, oh, hello. Okay. So just think of a compression, you know? Can you hear me? Everything okay? Something's happened.
Yes, everything's okay. Yes.
Okay.
Great.
So just think of a physical compression. So that will just, it doesn't go anywhere, as in it doesn't disappear. It just pushes something else. And yeah, sorry. So I suppose I can't go further in the sense that I don't know what disease to think of as an example. A book for that, if you haven't got it already, is Louise Hay, something about life. Louise Hay. Louise Hay, Hay. So Google her, something about healing, life healing or something. She actually has all emotional, all diseases described in emotional states. So
Yes.
just think of those emotions.
Healing for your life.
Thank you, Linda. Exactly.
Okay, last question. Can breathing into the discomfort help, and do you recommend it?
Oh my God. Thank you for bringing the word breathing, because simple, straightforward. Yes, absolutely yes. But some time ago, again, I quoted somewhere, I can't remember who from or whatever, but so that essentially fear just gets me every time. Fear is excitement without breath. So just think about that. I'm all goosebumps just saying it. Every time, so if it's discomforting, something really not uncomfortable, right? If you breathe into it, you will discover, oh, I have. And so I have, and I have a on my YouTube soon enough, is that when you do that, when you kind of center, which is kind of how you start to breathe more relaxedly and breathe out and, and fill yourself with air, you know, you start to feel excited for the very situation and that you're in, causing you so much discomfort just minutes ago. So yes, yes, yes.
Excellent, excellent answers. Thank you so much. And that brings us to
Pleasure.
the end of your meeting. Any final words?
Oh, I just am so grateful for this, for the opportunity to be sharing this with you. Whoever's now here with me, thank you so much for your time, and whoever's going to be watching it later, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm just so grateful, and my heart's full. So, and I hope this has been helpful. That's, you know, it will kind of give you some food for thought and just some stuff to work with, you know. So that would be my goal. Hopefully, I achieved it.
Yes, excellent. It's been very helpful. Thank you so much. And
Pleasure.
thank you from all of us. Maya from Darker
Thank you.
Materials. Thank you, Maya. See
Thank
you
you.
next time.